Hi everyone, I'm Travis R. Chance, the designer of Infamy. I thought I'd put together a little video to give you guys a better understanding of how the game is played. What we're going to do right here is we're going to break down the turn structure and give you a step-by-step introduction to the mechanics and how the game is played. Each round begins with the contact phase, during which 5 contacts will be available. Contacts provide resources and abilities that are necessary to winning the game. At the start of each day round, players will have 12 bribes to use for the purposes of bidding on these contacts, but they must remember that another 5 will be available at the beginning of the following night round. First, the Triggerman must move the Terran Watchdogs. This will make a sector inaccessible in the next phase of the game. Player 1 starts with an opening bid, paying expenses first. This is called the pay-to-play mechanic. Player 1 places a bid of 3 on the contact. Player 2 decides that he is going to raise by placing 4 and spends 1 for expenses. Player 3 passes. Player 1 raises. This means he must again spend expenses. He then takes 2 more bribes and places them on the contact for a bid of 5. Player 2 passes, retrieving his bid of 4 from contact 1. After this, player 1 takes all but one of his bribes, flipping them over to the X side and places them in his spent bribe pile. The last step is to resolve the contact. Player 1 takes 2 data, which is the reward for winning the hacker. Player 2 wins the cloner, which is the second contact, uncontested with a bid of 2. Of course, he pays his expenses first, and he then resolves the ability, taking a henchman token. Player 3 manages to win the peddler, the third contact, with a bid of 1. He takes a weapon token. He then attempts to bid on the fourth contact, the liaison. Player 1 passes, but unfortunately, player 2 has different plans. Using the liaison's ability, player 2 gains 1 reputation in the cartel. Player 3 attempts to win the last contact, the accomplice, but he is outbid by player 1. This means that player 3 has spent 4 bribes this contact phase, 1 to win the peddler and 3 for expenses. Player 1 takes the accomplice components and becomes the Triggerman. Let's move on to the sector phase. Here, players will use their sector cards, which correlate to the 6 sectors on the board, to determine which sector they would like to enter. Each player simultaneously chooses and reveals their sector card. The player with the highest contact order will have the opportunity to place their pawn first. Since he bribed the accomplice during the prior contact phase, player 1 will place an additional pawn this round. Each sector has 3 zones, 2 resupply zones, and a mission zone. Player 1 consults the available missions. Since he has chosen Sector 2, he must make sure that there are missions available for that sector. In this instance, there are actually 2 missions. Terran Collusion, which costs a compound and 3 data. And then there is Liberate Prisoner, which costs 2 weapons. While there are 2 missions, he may only complete 1. Incidentally, he only has the resources to complete the one, Terran Collusion. He pays its cost, and then completes its reward text. He is now able to play an additional scheme during the following phase. Additionally, he will gain 1 reputation for the Trust Megacorp, as well as 3 infamy points. After player 1 resupplies with the accomplice, player 2 resupplies at the cartel headquarters. Headquarters are different than other resupply zones. When you resupply at a faction's headquarters, if you have no reputation in that faction, you gain 1 reputation. If you do have reputation in that faction, you would instead draw a scheme from the corresponding faction's scheme deck. Lastly, the player that is lowest on the contact track places their pawn. Since the mission zone is unavailable, the only option would be to resupply. Player 3 then chooses to take 1 data token. The last phase in the round is the scheme phase. Here, players may play a single scheme card from hand. It's important to remember that not all players will have a scheme to play. Player 2 resolves the scheme hustle and recovers 4 of their spent bribes. If no one has won the game at this point, players retrieve their bribes from contacts they won, as well as their pawns. Replace any completed or sabotaged missions, and if it's day, simply flip the marker to night. Next, deal out 5 contacts from the 8 remaining in the contact deck. A new contact phase begins, with players using whatever available bribes they have left from the prior day round. If it's a night phase, players gain 1 infamy for every 2 henchmen they have, and they then recover all of their spent bribes, meaning that players will have access to all 12 of their bribes at the start of every day round. Play continues like this until a single player has won the game. A player wins the game by gaining 15 or more infamy, or 5 reputation in a single faction. So that's Infamy. I'd just like to thank you on behalf of myself and Mercury Games for taking the time to check out this video. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to post here on Board Game Geek or on our Kickstarter page. Thanks for watching.